Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is I guess, US political update concerning what's geopolitics in general, concerning Greenland and Canada and what's going on with the US. I've talked previously a number of times and with different people about what could be the game here. It could be that the US is going for this, or the Trump administration is going for this isolationist yet expansionist approach to global politics, where it's almost as if Trump sees things from a real estate mafiosa type scenario. Everything is transactional. You are the kind of bully, you're the kingpin, and what you say goes. And if you want that bit of real estate, you go and get it. It's yours. I'm going to get that. Rather than seeing things, you taking that onto the geopolitical realm, into the geopolitical realm, rather than see things in terms of how they really are. That international geopolitics is very complicated, and you might have to work in alliances, and it's kind of a 4D game of chess. We have learnt to expand our influence through trade in the last 100 years. Rather than doing what we did hundreds of years ago, which is going around the world sticking your flags in places and taking an area of land by force because you wanted the resources that land could give you. So I think that Trump might be wanting to isolate himself from the world in terms of don't want to work in alliances, WHO, UN, NATO, don't like the EU, etc., etc. The US is very powerful, but I want to use our power we're going to expand by getting places like Canada, Greenland, Panama, by being hard to our enemies who are soft-bellied competitors. So not our enemies, our allies. So I don't really believe in allies. It's a zero-sum game. All allies are really just competitors. They're just softer competitors that we can take advantage of. We can't attack our enemies because they'll fight back, but we can attack our allies because they won't fight back, and they'll be like, oh, what's going on here? And so Mexico and Canada and Greenland and the EU and etc., Panama, Colombia, Venezuela, we're going to just be a bit old school with our approach to them and be quite imperialistic. So we might be expanding our territory, but really what we're doing is we're trying to get all those natural resources in order that we can exist without the need to buy stuff from other countries. Now, we're happy to sell stuff. So we're cool with exporting, but we don't want a trade deficit. So we want to export stuff and not buy stuff in. So in order to have that situation, we need to onshore all the jobs that have gone abroad, as in manufacturing's gone abroad. We need to bring that home. So we want to put tariffs on everything that we're bringing in so that we can make sure that the Americans make these things. Now, that's going to cause some massive job losses potentially to begin with, and huge inflation. But eventually, and it could be that this is a 50-year game, eventually the US will be self-sufficient in everything, and then hopefully we'll still be strong enough and competitive enough that people will want to buy our stuff and will export it as well. Of course, the problem is when you're doing things that are inflationary, people aren't going to be wanting to buy your stuff, especially if you're whacking tariffs on them, because they're going to be whacking tariffs on you. So your export market is going to somewhat crater potentially, and all the problems that come along with that approach. But I think that's what he's thinking in a very simplistic macroeconomic way. And it's quite old school and imperialistic, as I say. The question that many people have is, well, is he being serious about this? And everyone, other than people on the internet and, I don't know, supporters of him who don't want to see this as imperialistic, say, oh, you don't have to listen to what he says. You want to look at what he does. You just don't always take him so seriously, but it's hard not to when he's consistently saying the same thing.
I think it's important. It's important from the standpoint of international security. And if you look at the ships outside of Greenland, you have Russia, you have China, you have lots of different people and lots of different places, and it cannot go on the way it is. It's not going to go on the way it is. I'll make a statement. It's not going to happen. So they're going there, and that's purely friendship.
Who's doing the inviting? You said people.
A lot of people, yeah. People from Greenland are asking us to go there. We have many, many requests from many, many people, some officials too. Yeah, sure.
And that's not true. That last bit particularly. There might be some truth to do, and again, you have to parse out what he's really trying to say, because his language, I've just done a video on Trump's language being just so simplistic, but also the way he constructs his sentences based on poorly formed thoughts means that he smashes together ideas and changes the subject of the sentences, and he does that a lot there. But the basic idea, if we can get to the heart of what he's saying, is that there are security issues with the Arctic Circle. You've got climate change, which is making the ice, these passageways that would normally be covered with these ice sheets, more navigable. And that means that Russian ships and Chinese ships can access North America. Okay, so what do we do about that? And there are genuine security issues that the US might have, but these things could be achieved or solved by doing deals with Denmark or deals with Greenland, right? And deals with Canada, maybe. That you do this through trade and negotiations and alliances. But of course, Trump doesn't like alliances. They're always competitors. And the only way that we can achieve what we want is not by going to Greenland and saying, oh, can we put another 3 bases on here? Can we mine this area? Can we do that? And we'll come to an arrangement. It's like, we need to own that. The only way we can get the most out of this is by owning Greenland. Then we can do what the hell we want with it. And actually, that might end up being more expensive, the more expensive way of doing it. You know, it's often more efficient to go about doing things in the ways that have been tried and tested over the last 70 years. Now, as Ola Jølsen here says, Trump has made at least 5 explicit or strongly implied threats to take Greenland. Trump mentions Greenland, he mentioned it again this evening, she said on the 27th. 1, Denmark must, as soon as possible, request an emergency meeting at the UN Security Council to address the threat. Under Chapter 7 of the UN Charter. 2, Denmark must ASAP invoke Article 4 of the NATO Treaty. 3, Denmark must ASAP bring a case to the International Court of International Court of Justice regarding threats from the United States to take control of Greenland. Denmark, as a sovereign nation and a member of the United Nations, has a right to submit a dispute to the ICJ if it believes another state, in this case the USA, who is violating international law. Greenland is an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark, and Denmark retains authority over its foreign affairs and defence. Threats from the USA to seize Greenland is violation of Denmark's sovereignty, potentially breaching principles enshrined in the UN Charter, such as Article 2(4), which prohibits the threat or use of force against the territorial integrity of another state. Of course, as well, and back to me, is also in contravention of Articles 1 and 2 of the NATO Charter, the NATO Treaty. So, yeah, what is going on here? But I think at the very least we need to take Trump seriously, and you wouldn't be sending JD Vance and Usha Vance to Greenland if you weren't serious about this. In fact, they have arrived today. We're going to get to, no. We're going to get to that later. So JD Vance has arrived there. Now, first of all, let's just go through what had happened, which was that Usha Vance, that's JD Vance's wife, was going to go there, go to a dog sled race and do some photo ops at some shops. And then that started getting turned down. So they got acceptance. She's going to do these photoshops, and people then decided not to do that. And so they had to go back to the Americans and say, actually, no, you're not so welcome here. And in the end, they had to cancel the dog sled race. And it all was looking highly, looking very much like it was some bad PR in the making. Here's Brian Tyler Cohen talking about it.
Not to eliminate it. Well, that went over about as well as you'd imagine. According to one Danish broadcaster from TV2, representatives from the US have been going door to door in Nuuk over the past few days to find Greenlanders who wanted to be visited by Usha Vance. After they failed to find anyone, the visit was canceled. In fact, far from getting a warm welcome, this was the reality on the ground.
And worth looking at that banner that was on the show there.
And if you take a look right here, you can see a sign reading Yankee Go Home, which, growing up, I only thought I'd ever see in Boston, but apparently Trump has managed to make America hated in even one of the most peaceful places on Earth. Here's one Danish broadcaster himself explaining the situation. This was dubbed from Danish into English.
It is an expression of the fact that the Americans finally realized what the reality was, namely that if they had come here to Nuuk, as planned tomorrow, they would have been met with riots, demonstrations, and a massive police presence simply to ensure their own safety. They realized that they were not wanted here. American representatives have been going around practically knocking on one door after another in the past few days to ask if they would like to be visited by the vice president's wife. And everywhere the answer was the same: no. Otherwise, thank you. And that's why the plans have been changed.
And so now, rather than settling in for her little conqueror's visit, the vehicles that had been transported to the city were instead sent back onto military aircrafts, as evidenced by the photos that you can see right here on the screen. And all of this stands in stark contrast to this bullshit that was being spouted by Republican Senator Tommy Tuberville, whose mouth seems to be surgically attached to Donald Trump's ass.
Oh, it's on the radar screen. President Trump is...
And this is where you have to say, right, we're going to... And I've shown you this video twice before, but it's like... We're serious here, as in the US is serious here with regard to Greenland, and Tommy Tuberville is echoing what Trump has said, which is we are going to take it; it will be ours.
Two things: Panama Canal and Greenland. Panama Canal is working out exactly the way he wanted it to. You know, BlackRock bought both of the ports down there. The same thing with Greenland. It's all about national security, but it's as much about for the people of Greenland as anything. And if you just listen to them talk when they interview them on some of the interviews over the last month, they're all in on it. Now it's just we're going to have problems with the other group across the water. But I think President Trump's exactly right here. We don't keep going there for our health. I'll tell you, you don't go up there for your health. You go there to make something happen. President Trump's right on line with this. And again, he'll make it happen. He's a deal maker.
Sure, Tommy.
He'll make it happen. So what is it happening? Well, I'd assume that is making Greenland part of the US, right? Vance is up there, said he will talk about US interest in Greenland. In a nightmare scenario for Danish officials watching this from Copenhagen, he adds, and then we're gonna just talk about, as you've heard, we have some interest in Greenland from the Trump administration, so we're going to talk a little about it with our friends in the media. The Trump administration, the president is really interested in Arctic security. As you all know, it's a big issue, and it's only going to get bigger in the coming decades. Wow. So Vance says, our argument is with the leadership of Denmark. It's very simple. It's not with the people of Greenland, who I think are incredible, have an incredible opportunity here. I'm sure he really cares for the Inuit communities and so forth in Greenland. I'm sure that's at the top of his list. Our argument really is with the leadership of Denmark, which is under-invested in Greenland and under-invested in its security architecture. That simply must change. But then you can do that without being so aggressive. They say you've not done a good not done a good job by the people of Greenland. He's attacking Denmark for not keeping pace with resources and keeping Greenland safe. This is very similar to the Trumpian approach to attacking Canada, attacking Europe, and also Vance's approach to attacking Europe in the way he has. Just really picking on those soft-bellied allies rather than taking aim at adversaries around the world. So it talks about the importance of the Greenland base. I love this from the Guardian report here. J.D. Vance delivers his speech in Greenland. US Vice President J.D. Vance is about to start his speech, and then it has strike-through for crossed out Danish political leaders watching it anxiously from Copenhagen. No, he's actually about to start speech to the members of the US military personnel stationed in Greenland. So his talk is not to the military personnel. Of course, it's to the watching Danish politicians. So it is serious, and we'll have to wait to see exactly how it plays out, but it's incredibly aggressive. What is particularly insane about Trump's approach to Denmark and Greenland is that US and Denmark signed an agreement in 2023, says Shashank Joshi, that expanded American military access to Danish facilities themselves. Denmark would also have been willing to go even further. Just incredible that they're going this way about it. Just Harry Enton here saying just 6% of Greenlanders want to join the United States. So this is going against what we heard earlier, that, they're up for this. What Donald Trump says is just simply not true. There are more people who think we faked the moon landing, which is around 10%. 85% of Greenlanders are opposed. Meanwhile, less than 30% of Americans want Greenland to join the US. I've rarely seen anything so unpopular, says Harry Enton here. Absolutely incredible. Now, Putin has come out and gave a big speech last night, saying, among other things, that Trump is serious about his Greenland ambitions. So, if you don't believe Trump, you can maybe believe Putin. But Putin, I think, is playing a wily old game here. So this may only at first glance surprise some. It is a big mistake to believe that this is some extravagant talks by the new US administration. So US plans for controlling Greenland are serious, says Putin. It's a deep mistake to think that some extravagant talk from the new American administration. It is nothing of the sort. So it is serious. Well, let's actually listen to his words here. He's effectively offering to support and acknowledge an American sphere of influence in the Western Hemisphere in exchange for the support and acquiescence of establishing Russia's in Eastern Europe. This is Putin playing the game of we'll support you in having Greenland and say that you're serious. And then we'll take on Ukraine, thank you very much, and we'll come to some agreement where we carve up Europe. Russia will have Eastern Europe, we'll have Ukraine, thank you very much, and yet you're going to have Greenland, and then our two empires will meet, and we don't have to worry about all this kind of guff in between. I don't know, it seems pretty plausible to me. As Yaroslav Trofimov says, let's go to what Putin says himself. I've got that here because it's dubbed into English. So let's listen to him.
For anybody, and it would be a great mistake to believe that these are just some eccentric talk of the new American administration. Nothing of the kind. In fact, such plans were obvious back in 1860s. Back then, the U.S. administration considered the possibility of annexation of Greenland and Iceland, but this idea was not supported by Congress at that time. Let me remind you that by 1869, the American papers laughed at the purchase of Alaska. The deal was called a folly. Alaska was called an icebox. And polar bears garden of Andrew Johnson, the U.S. president at the time. So the suggestion to incorporate Greenland failed at the time, but now the purchase of Alaska obviously is looked at the U.S. quite differently, just like the deeds of Andrew Johnson. So it is nothing surprising about what's happening now.
And what he's doing is he's laying out some historical justification for this, rather similar to how you could do with Ukraine. Khrushchev gave Crimea, blah, blah, blah. You're going back into history and you're saying, actually, this is fairly reasonable. And that gives permission for Putin to do the same with Ukraine. Carl Bildt says, from his point, it's a move as smart as it is devious. Putin de facto endorses Trump's attempt to take over Greenland, and for him it opens up avenues for US-Russian Arctic cooperation as well as possible Russian territorial advances. Meanwhile, I love this, riffing off the old, in fact my mug has that, the old Russian warship, go F yourself, That's what that says on my mug. But then you had the famous stamp that was brought out of the Ukrainian soldier doing that on Snake Island. Well, here we have Denmark 2025, and you got a polar bear flipping the bird and an American warship. And I quite like that. So yeah, Greenland, incredible stuff. Now we go on to Canada, where there's equally kind of bellicose, certainly in terms of rhetoric and economic coercion, where there's bellicose talk from the president. Now he came out with this. I love the reaction there. We'll talk about that in a second. If the European Union works with Canada, says Donald Trump, in order to do economic harm to the USA, large-scale tariffs, far larger than currently planned, will be placed on them both in order to protect the best friend that each of those two countries has ever had. So the first thing, he's calling the EU a country. That's weird. Second thing, he's saying, we're your best friends. We're the best friend you've ever had. And by the way, we're whacking tariffs on you. We're making you pay for stuff over and above what you were, like, because that's what best friends do. I don't know, weird thoughts there coming from Trump. But it is it's this idea that he's so in love with tariffs. Tariffs are the answer to everything. And you're just a 51st state of America, Canada. You go, you're not worth anything, and we're gonna do this to you. That'll screw you over. And then they go and react appropriately to that, which is okay, says Canada to the US. If you're going to harm us in this way economically, then we're going to go and be friends with the EU over here. If you're not going to be our best friend you've ever had, then we're going to become really good friends with the EU. You can't do that. Yeah, we can. Well, why did you put these tariffs on us? Yeah. No, you've got to stay there and just get screwed over. You can't go and do business with them. We've got tariffs on them too. Yeah, that's why they're doing business with us. We're going to be mates together in some kind of free market agreement. And you're just being a dick, the US, Trump. But anyway, I love this reaction. The pro to this is Canada is now a country again. So we're the best friends you two countries have ever had. So Canada's now become a country, where he kept calling it the 51st state and calling Justin Trudeau the governor. So now Canada is a country. So that's a good thing. The con is that Europe is no longer a continent. It's become a country. I just love that reaction. So proud to be from that great country, the European Union, says Alistair Campbell. Quite a bit of consternation in reaction to Trump's Truth Social post there. But this has forced Mark Carney, or as some people call him, Dark Carney, Mark Carney, to become really robust in his rhetoric back to the US. This is incredible talk. Just my goodness, as Don Winslow here says, holy SH1T.
The old relationship we had with the United States, based on deepening integration of our economies and tight security and military cooperation, is over.
Oof.
What exactly the United States does next is unclear. But what is clear is that we, as Canadians, have agency. We have power. We are masters in our own home. Nous sommes maîtres chez nous. We can control our destiny. We can give ourselves much more than any foreign government, including the United States, can ever take away. We can deal with this crisis best by building our strength right here at home. It will take hard work. It will take steady and focused determination from governments, from businesses, from labor, from Canadians. We will need to dramatically reduce our reliance on the United States. We will need to pivot our trade relationships elsewhere. And we will need to do things previously thought impossible at speeds we haven't seen in generations.
Really, really strong rhetoric from Mark Carney there. And Trump administration has whacked 25% tariffs on automobiles, on cars from abroad, all cars. You've got tariffs on aluminium and steel. You've got tariffs all over the shop, hitting the UK, hitting the EU. The EU is strong enough to stand up and have a trade war with the US. That seems to be incoming. The UK has announced that it won't be able to do that. If we stand up to the US in a trade dispute, we'll come off the worse for wear. So we are just bent over a barrel and have to take it from the US here, in the UK that is. So the Trump administration plans to almost double duties on Canadian softwood lumber to 27%. Tariffs may also hit the availability of northern bleached softwood kraft pulp, or NBSK, a key component in making toilet paper and paper towels. And of course, the US has then deregulated through, I think, gutting EPA, that's the Environmental Protection Agency, gutting some of their legislation. They're just going to, I'm sure, knock down a load of American lumber, their timber and wood. But actually, Canadian timber is better for a whole bunch of reasons. And it's not, you can't just go, oh, we're gonna use our own wood instead of the Canadian wood. It doesn't work like that. It's much more complicated. Now, Canadian tourism is apparently massively down, and that's looking forward to the amount of flights that have been booked going forward into the year. Canadian tourism to the US is down over 70% from last year. So the Canadians spend an absolute ton of money in the US. And they're not going to be doing this. This is going to hurt the US big time. Flight bookings between Canada and the US down 70% amid a Trump tariff war. Airline capacity between the two countries has reduced through October 2025 as high-profile incidents of ICE arrests are on the rise. So it's not just about the tariffs and about seeing Canada as some kind of adversary, but it's also that you've had Canadian citizens who have been detained. You've had Jasmine Mooney, the actor, who was detained and then deported after 2 weeks, being in chains and in handcuffs. Absolutely incredible stuff. Now, all of this will have a huge effect on both countries' economies, of course. But the Canadians can blame the Americans. The Americans will have to only blame Trump, I'm afraid. And it's the same with all the nations and the EU. The EU goes into a bit of a period of economic turmoil. Then we can definitely blame the the Trump administration, but the American people will have to blame Trump. Now, Ontario Premier Doug Ford here has hit back at Donald Trump's newly announced 25% auto tariffs, promising to inflict as much pain as possible on the American people. He says, I don't want to do it, but we will inflict as much pain on the American people as possible. Quite incredible. And then you've got this borderline syndrome, says Noel Reports, just talking about how Trump sort of flip-flops all over the place. Trump's here. I just finished speaking with, wait for it, Prime Minister Mark Carney, not Governor, Prime Minister Mark Carney of Canada. It was an extremely productive call. We agree on many things, and we will be meeting immediately after Canada's upcoming election to work on elements of politics, business, and all other factors that will end up being great for both the US and America and Canada. Thank you for your attention on this matter. A bit of a change of approach there. Wow. So, yeah, 25% tariff on all car imports for the US, sending shares in car makers around the world sharply lower. Trump said in the Oval Office that the tariffs will start off with a 2.5% base, which is where we're at, and go to 25%. The new levies on cars and light trucks will take effect on the 3rd of April, a day after Trump plans to announce a reciprocal tariffs aimed at countries responsible for the bulk of the US trade deficit. It's what he's calling Liberation Day. Shares in the US car makers fell in after hours trading after Trump's announcement. General Motors down 6.2%, Ford down 4.7%. And the cars at the UK's are the biggest export to the US from the UK. So Aston Martin, Jaguar, Land Rover, they are going to be hit hard. So you've got that. The UK will not escalate trade wars after Trump car tariff, says a finance minister. We're just not strong enough outside of the EU. And what else do we have? Interesting that Representative Don Bacon, who's strong on Ukraine, is one of the first, I think, most explicit critics of some of the legislation that is taking place.
To the United States, but Fords and Chevys made in the United States, all those prices are going to skyrocket. Now, could Republicans, Congressman, Republicans in Congress specifically be doing more to push the president to try to de-escalate his trade war? What leverage do you have?
Well, in Article 1 in the Constitution, really tariffs should be a congressional initiated action. So this should come from Congress. However, I think we made a mistake. In the past, we passed legislation that gave the president some temporary tariff authorities. And I think we should look back and maybe restore the power back to Congress and take away the authorizations that we've allowed the presidents, not just President Trump, but President Biden and President Obama before him. This power should reside in the House and the Senate. And we have the power of the purse. And so I think we should restore these authorities back to the House.
Well, that's an interesting proposal. Let's see if that happens.
Wow. So you've got Republicans saying, actually, Trump's got too much power. We need to take it back to the Congress. Wow. And then we hear today that Trump has warned US automakers not to raise prices in response to tariffs. This is price control, something the Republicans have gone haywire about previously. This is an absolute no-no for Republicans. They have gone nuts at Democrats when they've proposed similar sorts of things. The idea here is that even if you have car manufacturers in the US that are predominantly manufacturing their vehicles inside the US and with US components, by and large, I think it's impossible to get that fully the case. These aren't going to be affected by tariffs, arguably. So although there might see some price rises from components and whatnot, let's assume that they're not going to go up as much as a car that's like a Mercedes. Mercedes come in 25% on that, so that goes up 25%. US car manufacturers look at all these other cars coming in, Hyundai, Toyota, whatever, and I know some of these will have factories in the US, but the point is that even those that aren't affected by the tariffs directly will look at that and say, oh, they've had to put their prices up 25% to cover the cost of the tariffs. Now, that means that we can act a bit like a cartel. All these remaining car manufacturers can go, oh, there's an opportunity to actually make some money out of this because, you know, they've got to buy their car from somewhere. So we'll put our prices up like 6% or something like that. And people will be forced to pay that because actually there's no option. And so other car manufacturers, this is why it's inflationary, not just from the effect of the tariffs prima facie, but actually these secondary effects of the tariffs. But Trump has warned that they should not raise their prices. In other words, price controls. Like, we'll control how you price things. And protectionism doesn't want America to be the leader of the free world, anti-immigrant, shred civil liberties, anti-capitalist, bullies business, fiscally irresponsible, antediluvian social attitudes. This administration was cooked up in a lab to be everything I oppose. If you're appalled by the Trump administration's economic insanity, there you can go read about it from what this guy says elsewhere. But yeah, it's absolute economic insanity, you could argue. Breaking news, the European Union is reportedly considering retaliating against Trump's escalating trade wars by focusing on, and this is big, US services exports. So the services exports have like a 50%, I know this is kind of pulled out my backside, this is what someone was saying the other day. You might have like a 5% markup for vehicles that you're putting tariffs on, but services have like a 50% markup, and that will really hurt the Americans. There will be a lot of people not making as much money by a long shot if this happens. The European Union is reportedly considering retaliating with tariffs on services. Potential targets include major American tech firms such as Amazon Web Services, Netflix, Microsoft, Apple, Google, and Meta. These actions could restrict their access to EU markets and curb IP. Such a move could have significant economic repercussions, potentially leading to substantial job losses and disruptions across the US economy. Huge. And then that was supposed to be on another video. So yeah, it's really, really serious stuff happening. We'll have to see how it all turns out over the coming days and weeks and months. It wouldn't surprise me if Trump just completely gives in, as we've seen him do for Canada and Mexico for a month. But that was from lobbying from industry, I think. Well, there's going to be way more lobbying now. I do wonder whether he will match his bravado and bombast with a maintained pressure of these tariffs, or whether this will hurt the US big time. It's going to hurt everyone, but that's irrelevant to Trump. Is if his own people hurt enough that they start kicking off protesting, polls look bad. We've already had a special election that has been disastrous for the Republicans, and he's pulled Elise Stefanik back from running or from being the ambassador to the UN because he doesn't want to lose her in the House of Representatives, because the polls internally showed a 15-point shift to having the replacement for Elise Stefanik underwater, and losing that very safe seat there to the Democrats is not looking good because of things like this. He is underwater on the economy and on inflation, and I don't think any of this is going to help. Now, there are some, like the United Auto Workers Union, has come out in support of this to try and support onshoring and American workers. But generally speaking, this is seen as economically pretty naive. Let me know what you think, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.